G'day, Dons fans, and welcome back to Don the Stat. Another week, another defeat, but this time one that delivered some hope. A corner has been turned. A 9-point loss up on the Gold Coast didn't quite capture the full story. There was a lot to like. Our pressure was up. The contest looked more like it, and for large periods, we went toe-to-toe on their home deck. But as we've seen a bit this season, it's the moments that matter that are costing us. What does matter is we appear to have a young group that is confident and starting to believe, and that might just be the difference as we look ahead to Anzac Day, the biggest stage in the home and away season, Essendon v Collingwood, the MCG. I'm Jonathan Walsh, and joining me as always is my co-host Ian Hume. Humey, how are you doing, mate?
Hey there, Jono. Look, the sun has been shining, the Bombers have been promising, and Anzac Day is approaching, so I'm doing really great. I know we've fallen short in the recent Anzac Day games, but I really do think there's a huge opportunity for the Bombers this week if they can stand up and take it. So I really can't wait for Saturday. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Thank you, mate. I enjoyed my time up on the Gold Coast last weekend. It was a shame we couldn't quite get across the line, but there was a lot to like about the way that we played and took on the game. It was obviously nice to be with family and see the game actually through my young nephew's eyes at times and just, be a little bit of a nuffy and sit back and enjoy it for what it was. And really looking forward to this Saturday, getting to the dawn service, of course, in the morning and then on to the G. It's a wonderful day and it's great to be part of it. I think as an Essendon fan, we're really fortunate that our club's part of this day.
Indeed. You mentioned your family there and your trip up to the Gold Coast to watch the game with them. I think the most well-received piece of content we've released in the history of the Donstat Patreon, and I think we're into our 4th year, was the first thoughts you did straight after the game with your brother and the kids. You're doing a really good job at teaching those boys the right way to watch football. And I think they'll be taking over this show before we know it. I think our days are numbered before the John Walsh nephews take over.
Yeah, well, look, between them and your... well, at least one of your two young fellas is an Essendon fan, mate. So, maybe we've got a father-son podcast rule that we can, or uncle-nephew podcast rule as well that we can hand the baton on to down the track. But, they obviously only get to see Essendon play once or twice a year. So, it was great fun watching the game with them. And, they particularly the older two, watch footy in a similar way to my brother and I do, which is probably a bit of a curse, really. But, we had a good day out despite the result and, they were able to get some autographs and high fives and things like that. So it was good fun.
Yeah, indeed. Look, before we do move on, just as regards to the Patreon, I want to say a big thank you to Nate, Hugo Cutrone and Steve Kenny for signing up this week. Also want to give a big thank you to longtime patron Matt Pocock for putting his hand up and joining me to talk about his best Essendon side since he began watching 1997. It was a lot of fun for us to put that together and it was well received by the Patreon community. So thank you, Matt, again for having the confidence to put your thoughts out there.
Yeah, a huge shout out and thank you to the new members of the community. I think we say it every week, but we are grateful for the support. I listened to the episode with Matt yesterday as I was walking the dog and it was a lot of fun just to reflect back on some of the play. I like that Matt sort of avoided the obvious and just naming the 2000 premiership side. I think there would have been a temptation there just to run with a lot of more of those guys. But we've had some fabulous players in that period. So it was, job well done.
Well, I think he got your support fully for what he did when he put Dean Rioli in the side. I think once you heard his name, you were like locked in. Yep, this is the best side I've ever heard.
I did fist pump when I heard his name read out.
Look, before we get into reviewing the Gold Coast game, our final thoughts this week is going to be me asking Jono what positional move he'd be making this game to give us the best chance of success. We know in the last couple of weeks, the coaching staff have made some really pivotal positional moves that have given us a lot more opportunity to win games. So we would like to know what you would make, listeners. So let us know in either the YouTube comments or on our socials what positional change you would make going up against the Pies this week. And whilst you're there, please give us a like and subscribe on your podcast host of choice, particularly on YouTube. We are trying to build the YouTube community. Really helps get the show in front of more people. So looking forward to seeing what the listeners come up with.
Yeah, I like it, mate. Great idea. You certainly put me on the spot when you put that in the running sheet. So, we'll get to that shortly. But let's wind the clock back to last Saturday, mate, and chat about our game against the Suns.
Yeah, indeed. And I think as far as losses go, there certainly was a lot to like about what we saw last Saturday. Whilst I think we were flattered a bit on the scoreboard, particularly in that second quarter where the Suns kept missing gettable shots. And if you're an ex-score believer, which I mostly am, the Suns probably should have won that game by more than they did. Overall, you'd have to be pleased with the performance where the boys pretty much played a 4-quarter game and had the opportunity to win it late. So, arguably we were a couple of fumbles away from snatching the game. I think Caldwell had a couple and Peter Wright ones where if they took the ball cleanly, they were a much better chance of kicking the goal. Not to say that they cost us the game. They were difficult, hard chances at the time, but, a little bounces or little moments go our way and we could have walked away from that game winners.
Yeah, you're right. I think it'd be naive not to acknowledge that they missed a whole bunch of shots through periods of the game. I think particularly there was a bit of a run in the second quarter where they kept missing. So, yeah, I think the game could have looked differently. But I think there were also some moments in the game where I guess the sort of PTSD of being an Essendon supporter over the last few years, well, for a long time, but the events of the last few years sort of crept in and I was really worried that there was going to be some moments where the game was going to blow open. It sort of felt we'd had a good crack for a while, but had come up short against a really good team on their home deck, and maybe that was where the Suns had put their foot down and blow the game out. But yeah, we kept coming back at them. I think there's more resilience now building into this group, despite the number of players. I think we had, was it 11 under 50 games or thereabouts? Yeah, I think that was the most pleasing part of the game for me.
Yeah, indeed. And I think when you look at the numbers from this game, it was a really strange game if you just looked at the numbers. So Essendon won raw clearance by 8, but lost scores from clearance by 22, which is actually a pretty big pattern in Suns games this year where they haven't actually won bulk clearances, but when they've won it, they've been really effective. I think you think about Raul and particularly Petrarca sort of storming through the front of the clearance and getting that clear air. We didn't get that a whole lot. There was that really good Zach Merritt one, which he ended up kicking a goal on. But you think about our clearances, more often than not, they were a much more harder ones. Whereas when the Suns won it, they were a lot more effective, even though they weren't winning as many clearances as we were. But then if you flip it over, we turned the ball over 13 more times. So we gave the Suns 13 more chains starting off intercept, but we won scores from intercept by 17. The team that dominated the statistical area was the one that was least effective from scoring from it. It was a really interesting game from that aspect.
Yeah, a bit of an anomaly, I guess. I think for me, it wasn't the fact that they won clearance scores by 22. It was the timing of them, particularly their centre bounce goals that I thought were a real killer. They either stopped our momentum when we had it or it expanded their momentum when they had it and came at some really critical times. We'll expand on that shortly, but I thought that combined with a couple of turnovers, we were chasing the game at times, so you can kind of understand why we would take some risks to try and get back in the contest. But I think, yeah, for me, a lot of it was the timing of those events rather than the quantity of it. And I think, yeah, the other difference was they probably just had a couple of stars that really did rise to the top over our group. So, yeah, strange one, but not surprising either, I don't think.
Yeah, you touched on it there. Probably the moment that it really, really mattered was, that sort of last 7 minutes of the third quarter is a good example of what you mentioned there and what we've been talking about for a lot of the year, where games are always going to have momentum swings where one side has the advantage over the other. But it's how you handle them both as an attacking side and your ability to take advantage of that, and as a defensive side and able to restrict them when you don't often have the ball. So here in that back end of the third quarter, we were really unable to limit them in any way, and they absolutely punished us. So in that period in the back end of the third where they kicked 4 consecutive goals and really ripped the game away from us, they had 21 disposals to our 6 and 11 contested possessions to 5. So we didn't help ourselves with a couple of mistakes, a kick that Day-Wicks would like to have back, a couple of players not being able to kill the ball on the line that resulted in a goal to the Suns. But it really was another lesson in how your ability to restrict the damage when you don't have the momentum is a crucial element in getting a positive result in the game.
Yeah, it's just those little moments, isn't it, of lapse of concentration or not quite getting things perfectly right that having a big impact on the result. And I think that's the next gap we have to close. I think early in the season, that 4-goal sort of swing was probably a 6 or 7 goal swing in those early games. So, we bridged the gap there. Although they did kick the first goal the last quarter. So effectively it was 5 goals in a row. But yeah, I think that really does sum up the game for me. In the key moments, they were able to flex, particularly at centre bounce and hit the scoreboard. We were 11 points up halfway through the first, got to go off to a good start. They get a clean takeaway for a centre bounce goal. And then they got 2 in a row from the centre bounce late in Q1 to give them 11-point lead at quarter time. So, they where we looked like we probably had the bulk of the play in the first quarter, they kicked 3 goals to the quarter from centre bounces and go in by the best part of 2 goals up. Sullivan Rovey, has that wonderful moment where he kicks his first goal. We have all the momentum. Everyone's around him. Everyone's up and about. And then Took Miller runs through straight out the front of the centre bounce clearance and kicks a goal straight away and just, puts a needle in the balloon. And then their first goal after 3/4 time and the first minute of the last quarter comes from a centre bounce as well, just to sort of put that buffer in the way that was ultimately a little bit too hard to catch.
Yeah, indeed. But it is now 2 games in a row where we've done well in the clearances, at least from a raw perspective, something which we were really struggling with in the early part of the season. And that's with both Parish and Tsatas playing in the same side. So there's been a lot of people who felt in the past that it really had to be one or the other because they felt it would make us too slow around the ball and give us questionable ball use. But so far it seems to be working really effectively. I think Parish's ball use and decision-making has really improved. The problem Tsatas has had with his kicking and some of the concerns people have had there. But so far in his 2 games that he's played, his kicking's been really good. The one that he kicked to Kako was, centimetre perfect, as Dennis Cometti would say, that resulted in a goal there. So, it really seems like they're actually working really effectively together when I think there was a perception that they wouldn't. So I guess what have they provided for each other that's meant they're both excelling in these past couple of games, and that's meant that we've been getting such a clearance advantage over these past 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify. It certainly looks better, doesn't it? I think we've effectively made 3 changes to the midfield. Wright has taken the primary ruck role, and that started to happen in the game against the Bulldogs. Tsatas has obviously come into the side, and then McGrath has gone into the midfield as well. And ultimately, I think it's the sum of the parts, isn't it? Wright's giving us a better contest post-hit out and more impactful with and without the ball than what we were getting from Lockie Blackiston. He's had 11 intercepts, Peter Wright, the last 2 weeks. So to put that into context, Nick Madden at the Giants and Max Gawn lead all rucks for intercepts this season at 4.5 apiece a game. So Peter Wright, the last 2 weeks, has had 5.5 on average. So he's going better than the best the last 2 weeks of being able to disrupt and intercept. McGrath's, doing what he does best and adding that defensive resilience around clearance that we saw at times last year, in the back half of the year when the list was decimated. And then I think the other thing that's probably helping Darcy Parish as much as Elijah Tsatas is the fact that Darcy's now 6 games into his return. And I think the more games he gets, the more continuity he gets, the better he's covering the ground. That he seems to be trusting his body more, touching the wood on my desk right now to hope that continues. But yeah, I think the other thing that the addition of Elijah Tsatas is doing is just taking some of the reliance off Darcy to be our one and only true ball winner. And I think, we saw even Hawthorn in round 1 sort of locked down on Darcy after half time and we struggled to get our hands on the ball around the contest because of it. So it just gives us another option around there. Darcy is getting on the outside more and spreading. And then I think Caldwell's form has also probably had an impact of Elijah coming in and McGrath coming in. So we've now got, 2 ball hunters. We've got 2 sort of more defensive-minded mids with Caldwell and McGrath, and Caldwell's form has got better. And then I think for Elijah, it just means that, I think the hype of being a number 5 pick is now gone. Enough time has been put behind that. He's had to do it the hard way. That we're getting a bit more depth through the midfield now. He doesn't have to come in and be a gun and dominate. He just has to play his role. And he seems to have some confidence in his game. His ball use, as you said, has been good. His hands are great, that they always have been. So, yeah, I don't think it's any one thing, Matt. I think it's a combination of all of those. And I think the biggest thing for me around the contest and in the midfield is we're starting to see more balance around the contest. We speak a lot about this, particularly in the Patreon, in some of the analysis video analysis. There's a lot less of what I've called bees to the honeypot, where we sort of have all of our mids in trying to win the footy or half winning the footy, and rather we're getting more trust in our teammates to go in one-on-one and win the footy. And what that means is if we do win it, then we've got numbers on the outside to give the ball to. So there's less of that hot potato handball because we've got more spread outside the contest. And then if we don't win it, we've got players on the outside who can move straight into defensive structures. So yeah, I think it's all of those things at the moment that are just culminating to give us a better output around the footy.
Indeed. And with the addition of Tsatas, it's also had other flow-on impacts in the side, and it's seen Sam Durham transfer to being essentially a permanent high half forward. I think he's had 1 centre bounce attendance in the last 2 weeks. And then we've also brought Day-Wicks into the side, and that's correlated. It's hard to tell whether it's causation or correlation with an improvement of our level of performance. And you and I have spoken a lot in the past couple of years of the importance of the half forward position in the modern AFL. It's not just us. I think it's pretty well accepted across the competition that the half forward is one of the most important positions at the moment in terms of your ability to link up your play and structurally stopping teams from exiting from defensive 50. And it's why we've both been keen for the club to target Zach Bailey as a free agent. You've looked closely at the numbers for those two players in particular, Durham and Day-Wicks, since they've gone to that half-forward position. It suggests that it's actually working pretty well. What is that and what impact is it having?
Yeah, I think it's giving us some improvement in defensive attributes. And Day-Wicks the last couple of weeks has been playing as our third winger as well. So he's getting up the ground and involved more. Durham saw a little bit of midfield time last week, not nearly as much as he was early in the year. So they're both ranked by Champion Data as mid-forwards. So I've gone and had a look at the defensive impact or numbers of all mid-forwards in the competition that played 3 or more games this year, which is the number that Day-Wicks has played. So in that time, Day-Wicks is, of all players that have played 3 or more games, I should say, Day-Wicks is ranked first for midfield forwards, who are first for tackles, 14th for pressure acts, 8th for defensive half pressure acts, 1st for spoils, and 18th for intercepts across the AFL. Durham is 4th for tackles, 1st for pressure acts, 5th for defensive half pressure acts, 11th for spoils, and 12th for intercepts. So defensive actions or impact or attributes are through the roof for both of them.
Yeah, especially what you talk about there with the defensive half pressure acts. That means they're getting up to the back end of the ground and contributing there in terms of affecting defensively. And they're both quite good runners, so it means they are able to then, cover the ground and get back into attacking positions. I think if you think about previous years and some of the players who've been playing in that half-forward position, they haven't been able to do that transition aspect of being able to impact at both ends of the ground.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then they're having a bit of a threat with ball in hand. So Day-Wicks is the 8th highest ranked mid-forward for kicking threat. So, that's a judgment on the likelihood of a kick in that is going to then contribute to or create a scoring opportunity. So he is biting off a lot when he kicks the footy. Not always working in his favour. He's made some mistakes. You pointed out one in the game against the Suns, and there's been a few of those. But he's also, having an impact in hitting up some targets and creating goal-scoring opportunities. And I suspect that the more he plays, the fewer of those mistakes we're going to see, and the more of the good he's going to shine through. And I think we're already seeing that shift, week in, week out now. And then Sam Durham's rated 8th for mid-forwards for overall scoreboard impact. So that's everything from goals, goal assists, and score involvements as well. So, look, I think there's still lots of work to do, but I do think because of those two, along with Roby, Kako, Gresham has been better as well. We're getting more pressure on the opposition when we don't have the footy, and then more scoreboard pressure when we do. It's not a finished product yet. We're still allowing the opposition to transition too frequently in games. The Suns scored 32 points from defensive 50 chains on Saturday, 20 of that on turnover, the other 12 obviously on clearance. But we scored 37 points ourselves from forward half turnovers. So, yeah, we're sort of +5 in that part of the ground our way. So we're making some gains in being able to win the footy back and hit the scoreboard, but we're still giving up a little bit too much as well. The AFL average is 51 a game from turnover. Swans are number one ranked team in the comp at the moment, averaging 69.7 points. We outscored the Suns 70-53, and we outscored Melbourne 54-46. The Bulldogs 30-26. It was largely a stoppage score game. Yeah, last 3 weeks we've outscored our opponents in turnover scores, and I think that the impact of those half forwards in particular is playing a big role. And I think the other thing I like about Day-Wicks too is I think he's a bit of a hype man. I think he's replacing some of what we've lost with Sam Draper leaving the club. He loves a one percenter. He loves celebrating either his own or a teammate's big tackle or big bump or big chase or spoil. So, yeah, I think he's adding a lot to the group in that regard as well. And I suspect that the coaches think highly of him.
Yeah, indeed. Look, our old friend Champion Data, and, we've had our debates about the value of some of the things that Champion Data comes out with, but there were a few eyebrows raised when Champion's Data's numbers for this round had Andy McGrath as the second best performed player for the round across the league, even behind Jeremy Cameron with his 10 goals, but ahead of Nick Daicos and what he was able to produce against Carlton on Thursday night. Look, I didn't have him in my best players, but he's definitely had a big impact on the side since he's headed into the midfield. I guess, what did you notice about his game this week that would have had him rated so highly by the Boffins at Champion Data.
Yeah, I think my brother thought his game was of a high value and had him in his votes. He kicked a goal and had 2 goal assists, so they would be rated highly in the rankings. He had 6 inside 50s. He had the second highest ball use rating on the ground as well, just behind Petrarca, and then well clear of third best. What he did with ball in hand was impactful. Yeah, I thought he had a really good game in a well-defined role. I'm not sure he was the second best player in the game, though, and the coaches, I don't think he featured at all in the coaches' votes. Bit of an indicator on what the coaches thought. But yeah, I think that was probably the biggest takeaway from the game for me is we've touched on it. They missed some shots. Scoreboard probably flattered us a little bit. You talked about X score. I think they were -11 on X score. We were +15. So it swings both ways that brought the scoreboard closer. But I thought we had a really, really even spread of players. I thought Raul and Petrarca were clearly the two standouts. They were the cream that rose to the top. But I think we had probably 6, 7, 8 players that you could throw a blanket over to be in our top 3 players that would have sat comfortably alongside their next best. I think, we got a much more even contribution through our group, whereas the Suns, I felt, got dragged across the line really from a couple of stars.
Yeah, indeed. And look, speaking of stars, we're all really excited about some of our new talent. And we got a little bit of a taste of what we can expect from Sullivan Roby as well in his second game. He's obviously still finding his way at the level and coming off an interrupted preseason. But the bits we've seen are so exciting. He was really involved right from the first minutes of that game against the Suns with his defensive pressure. And then his finishing ability in the third and fourth quarters really, was outstanding, particularly that first goal. It just, when he kicked it, I just thought it was going to land, 20 metres from goal. And somehow it just kept going and going. And eventually it went straight through for a goal. It was one of the most amazing kicks I've seen. Look, if this is the sort of player we have coming off such a low training base, look out when he gets a good run at it.
Yeah, it's hard not to be excited, isn't it? It was so raw in the under-18 comp last year. You and I had Rick Edwards on, who in the lead up to the draft, who watched a lot of his games for Eastern. And I think my concern, albeit having just watched game footage, not being live, was, what of what he was doing was he just doing through brute force? He's such a big and imposing guy, young guy, and was there actually some smarts to his game? And I think, he was prone to just banging the ball and making some rush decisions with ball in hand last season. But those concerns have gone already now that I've seen him live. I think he's got a long way to go. He needs to build that tank and that engine. He, as you said, he really hasn't had a preseason. So, once he's had 2 or 3 preseasons in the system and he's got to 40 to 50 games, I think he's going to be a really, really impactful player, and long way to go. Let's not count our chickens before they hatch. But we've been crying out loud for a long time for a player that can impact a game in a short space of time by doing, being able to go to a contest, win a ball, and then burst from it and hit the scoreboard. We might have found one.
Fingers crossed, and fingers crossed he's able to get a good run at it across this season and really be able to build into. We saw how much of that getting that senior game time has benefited some of the other players that went through it last year, and giving him a taste at this early stage should really feed his hunger to be the best player that he can be. Moving on from the Gold Coast game, and we do have another Damien Barrett Lifetime Achievement Award coming this week, and this one comes from Tom Morris on SEN, where he ranked Essendon the furthest away from a premiership of all 18 sides. Look, I'd be trusting Tom Morris's football judgment about as much as I trust his WhatsApp group chat etiquette. Clearly he's engaging in clickbait to get people talking, and look, he succeeded, I guess, by getting us talking about it, but I don't really want to go into details why I think he's wrong, and that's probably a subjective opinion, but I still think it was clear that he's just trying to get reactions there. But he's also succeeding in getting his name on the nomination list for the Damien Barrett Award for the first time this year. And with the amount that this guy loves the smell of his own farts, don't be surprised if he appears again.
Yeah, well played, mate. I think the only thing that surprises me about this is that it's taken until round 6 for him to be nominated.
Yeah, look, that's probably the result of him being gagged from talking about football because he bailed on the employer that gave him a chance while he was in the wilderness.
Yeah, I guess these things are subjective, aren't they? Someone has to be ranked 18th if you're going to do the exercise, and I think it's probably a nomination for the exercise itself as much as it is for the rankings. But yeah, waste of airtime for him, and probably a bit of a waste of airtime for us. So I'm gonna move on to the Pies, and have a look at them, mate.
Yeah, indeed. And before we do, I think we've said it every time that we've previewed an Anzac Day game, but it is an absolute honour to get to participate on this day, even as a fan. It's always such a special occasion, and both clubs really do it justice with the way they commit to the commemoration of the past. It's really become a feature of Anzac Day, or at least for those of us in Melbourne. It's hard to imagine Anzac Day without it.
Yeah, no, that's right, mate. It is a special day. It always feels a real privilege being able to walk from, I guess in my case, that walk from sort of Richmond area across to the MCG and up the hill there to the Southern Stand. It's just a special atmosphere, and being live and witnessing the pre-game is really special as well. And I think, credit to the two clubs that have done a lot of work to build it up over a long period of time to what it is. But I think credit to the fan bases as well. I think Essendon and Collingwood fans don't like each other at the best of times, but there's a real special feel around Anzac Day. I think, both pre-game and the respect for, understanding that there's actually something bigger than football. And then I think even we've had some, maybe not as many as we'd like, some close battles over recent years. And, post-game, I feel like there's more often than not a great respect between the two fan groups as well when those close matches occur. So, special day, mate, and I can't wait. But, let's dig into the Pies, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, going back to last year, the Magpies started 2025 like a house on fire. They was sitting on top of the ladder by round 20. They did have a drop away at the end of the home away season, and that saw them finish in fourth, but then they won an away qualifying final against the Crows before going on to lose their home preliminary final to the eventual premiers in Brisbane. So far this year, the Magpies have gone 3 wins against St Kilda, GWS and Carlton, and 3 losses against Adelaide, Brisbane and Fremantle. They currently sit in 11th position with a percentage of 94.8.
Yeah, 4 of their 6 games this year have been decided by 14 or less points, and they're 2-2 in those games. So maybe they're losing their edge a little bit in close games. I think it was only a couple of years ago where they won almost all of their games that were decided by 2 or 3 goals. So, but I think what is still their trademark is to keep games more often than not a bit of an arm wrestle. So, I think we can expect to see that this week.
Indeed. Last season, the Pies were the 9th-ranked team for scores for. They averaged 85.6 points per game, but they had the best defence in the league. They were 71.3 points against. So far this season, their defences remain relatively similar. They're averaging 76.7 points against. They're currently ranked 3rd. Scores this season on average have been a goal higher. So essentially, they've been about the same level of defence. But their ability to score has really dropped away. They're actually down at 16th. They average 72.7 points per game. Partly the shift is down to their inability to gain territory on their opponents. So last year they were plus 4.8 inside 50s compared to their opponents per game. And this season they're giving up 2.7 inside 50s to their opponents per game. And once they've gone inside 50, it's really dropped away sharply, their ability to score. They're only scoring on 40% of their entries this year, which is the worst in the competition. The Pies, have been a fairly balanced side in their kick to handball ratio. They're averaging close to what you would expect from the league average. It's around 1.42 this year. And they've done that in both years. And given the stability that they've had over the last couple of years under McRae, you wouldn't imagine that they've made too many changes to this point.
Yeah, just to break that down a little bit further, they're ranked 9th for inside 50s in the AFL, 13 for inside 50s against, which leaves them 13th for inside differential. We're 17th, but we know we sort of had a bit of a bipolar season so far. We started really poorly and we're still recovering from the hammering in those 2 games. It's probably just worth noting the Pies did have 14 more inside 50s than Carlton last week, and 54% of that game was played in the Pies halves. That they have shown that they've got different ways of going about it.
Yeah. One area where the Magpies have really struggled this year is in the middle. They've dropped from slightly above break even in centre clearance per game of plus 0.3 to minus 3.7. So they're really getting dominated in the middle. They're also scoring 3 points less and conceding 2 points more from the rest of the competition from this source. So they are really struggling both in raw numbers from centre clearance and in terms of being able to score and defending score themselves. They improved their work at stoppage clearance, however, going from 16th to 8th in differential, where average is close to break even, so they win as many as they lose. However, they've really struggled to score from this source so far this year. They're only averaging 7.7 points per game from stoppage clearance, which is the worst in the competition. They've also been the 18th best side for both contested possession and ground ball gets differential. So they are really struggling in the contested aspects of the games at this point of the year.
Yeah, the AFL average for clearance score, which is centre bounce and stoppage combined, is 33.6 points a game. We're right on that, ranked 11th, 33.3, so 0.3 behind the AFL average. North are ranked number 1, 43.7. Port Adelaide are ranked 16th at 24.7 points a game. The Pies are a fair way behind that. They're 17th ranked, only ahead of Richmond. So, yeah, down at, I didn't put it in the notes, but it's like 17 points per game. They're not getting scored heavily from the source. They're ranked 3rd for clearance scores against, but they're still giving away almost 11 points a game to be ranked 15th in differential. We're ranked 13th with a differential of minus 4.8. But again, we've had some challenges early in the season, copped a little bit of a whack last week by the Suns. But yeah, I think it's a part of the game this week where we would think that we have a really good chance of getting some ascendancy.
Indeed. What is really holding the Pies together so far is their aerial and intercept games. So Collingwood has been able to win games when they've kept the ball off their opponent. So in their wins so far this year, they've gone plus 23 in terms of marks, but a minus 26 per game in their losses. So it's really been a ball control season from the Pies. It's a defending with ball in hand type of game style at the moment for them. When they don't have the ball, they're struggling a little bit, but they're also, still remain one of the best sides in the competition in sort of winning the ball back, particularly if it's aerial. They're the best. They were the best intercept mark side in the competition last year with plus 3 per game. They're still ranked 4th this year with plus 1.33. So they still have that in their kit bag, but their general intercepting ability. So intercepts that occur on the ground have really fallen away. So their overall intercept differential was plus 5.8 per game last year. It's minus 2 this year. So whilst the aerial aspect is still pretty good, when you look at the ground ball stuff, they are really struggling to win the ball back off their opposition.
Yeah, we'll break this down a little bit when we get to the sort of match preview, but their ability to set up the ground and defend the midfield zone is probably what they do best. They haven't been turning that sort of intercept into scores. They're ranked 10th for scores on turnover. We're behind them in 14th, but again, we shared the numbers earlier. We've seen some strides in the last couple of weeks. But they are well set up to defend scores on turnover. They're ranked 6th in the AFL at preventing a turnover score. So, yeah, they're a bit of a weird team to get a handle on, but I think ultimately what they do is defend the midfield zone of the ground really, really well, set up behind the ball quite well, intercept in their defensive 50, and then defend a little bit with ball in hand as well by not exposing their team to being scored on in turnover by trying to get a lot of uncontested marks. But yeah, that they made a couple of changes, lost a little bit of experience in the off season, mate. Do you want to talk us through it?
Yeah, so 8 players departed the Pies in the off-season, including 5 of their 2023 premiership side. Will Hoskin-Elliott retired. He played 18 games in 2025. Brody Myercheck was squeezed out and traded to Melbourne. He played 22 games. And then 6 others were delisted, including Mason Cox, Tom Mitchell, and Oleg Markov, who were the other 3 premiership players from 2023. He played 10, 4, and 8 games respectively. And then Charlie Dean also was delisted, having played 4. Magpies made 1 trade, bringing in Jack Buller from Sydney, who played 2 games so far this year. I think they were the first 2 games of the season, and then he hasn't been seen since. The earliest pick last year was at 32, following what they gave up for Dan Houston the previous year. They took Tyan Prindable, followed by Sam Swadling at 37 and Zach McCarthy at 55. None of those have played a game yet. However, pick 55, 50's Angus Anderson's played 2 games so far. They also took a Cat A rookie in Jai Saxena, who is yet to debut. So, they lost a fair bit of experience, relying a bit more on the lit Steph, and they haven't really tested their new players other than Anderson, who's been in the side the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll get to selection in a sec, but Anderson has held his spot for his 3rd game on the trot. He's a 22-year-old mature age recruit, 190 centimetre midfielder. He's more than capable of finding his own footy, but he's got some burst as well. He's been spending a little bit of time in the midfield, but largely playing it at half forward. So yeah, we'll get to see him up close on Saturday. But rolling into selection, 2 changes for us, mate. Dyson Sharp is back, which means our 3 first-round draft picks will all play their first Anzac Day match together. Jackson Pryor comes back after being managed last week. And then out is Jade Gresham, who's been omitted, and of course Jordan Ridley, unfortunately, has had another calf injury.
Yeah, indeed, another 3 to 4 week setback for Jordan there, just when things were looking a little bit good in terms of the way our defence was set up. And we didn't really touch on it when we covered the Suns game, but that it was a bit after he went off. He went off at the start of the third quarter, but I think having Jordan out there for that back end of the third quarter might have helped us with managing the momentum that the Suns had. And unfortunately, they came at a really poor time for us in the game. I think Pryor coming back in was a no-brainer. Arguably, he would have come straight back in if Ridley wasn't injured anyway, given he was only rested last week, and he's been in reasonable form for much of the year. What it has meant, though, is Ridley going out and Pryor coming in for him. It does mean that Sardal Hooley has stayed in as well, which is a reward for his performance last week. I thought, for what we saw, he was, he's showing signs of improvement. It's probably coming a bit slower than we might have thought, given how he sort of burst into his mid-season draft and what we saw early from him in his VFL form. But I think he's slowly getting a hang of what is required at AFL level, both offensively and defensively, and we're starting to see him express himself a bit more. So great opportunity for him to get another game. I do love that Sharp gets to play in this important game. He's obviously a big part of our future. I think the decision we've made of who to omit for him does raise a few questions for us structurally.
Yeah, I think just quickly on Sardal Hooley, I thought he was unlucky to be omitted for the Melbourne game. So I'm pleased that he was back last week and then they've backed him in to go again this week. I'm not surprised by these changes, but I don't love them. As you said, Pryor for Ridley was pretty obvious. The Pies don't have a lot of height forward. Membry and McStay are their two keys. Membry is a player that's done well against us in the past, but he is 188 centimetres. He kind of plays taller than that, doesn't he? But he doesn't have a lot of vertical height. Are there any other kinds of heights? But yeah, and then they also are running the two ruckmen as well. So one of them will spend time forward at various times, but we probably didn't need a genuine tall this week. I think we just need to back in Pryor to be able to take a Membry matchup when needed. I think, look, I understand the keenness to expose Dyson Sharp to a game like this. You and I were both really keen on him at the draft. He was the number one on the list for both of us. So I'm Essendon supporter growing up as well. So I'm pumped that he's going to be out there. But I think for a team balance, sort of perspective, I think the Gresham omission is a bit of a strange one. If there were reasons why he was being left out, although from on the surface I thought he was playing some decent footy, then maybe Jaden Ewan, who's been playing well in a forward role the last few weeks at VFL level, was the one to bring in. But yeah, what it does mean is we've got 9 guys who have never played in an Anzac Day game before, which is pretty exciting as well, and 5 of them actually to the 3 first-round draftees plus Archer May and Lockie Blackiston. They weren't even on our list last Anzac Day. So quarter of the team fronting up on Anzac Day for the first time who weren't on the list 12 months ago just shows the turnover we've made to this list in a pretty short space of time.
Indeed, and then for the Pies have brought in some experience. A couple of players have got up in Jordan DeGoey and Steele Sidebottom, players who have tormented us in Essendon and Collingwood matches for a long time now. Out goes Ed Allen, omitted, and Ned Long, who's been managed. Long's a bit of an interesting one given their struggles to clearance, although he's been down on what he produced last year. And I guess they're backing in players of the experience of DeGoey and Sidebottom to help them deal with that issue they have had at clearance for a while. Both of those players are the sort that can really get dangerous from the clearance situation and could help their clearance scoring situation that they've struggled with so far this year.
Yeah, it's sort of pretty handy ins, aren't they? They're both fabulous players and match winners in their own right. Darcy Moore didn't get up, so that leaves them with Frampton and Howe as their 2 key defenders. Howe at 190 centimetres is undersized, but he does a great job. He's got that vertical leap, so he plays taller than that. But it probably does mean that Maynard, given that we've got the 3 talls, will probably have to play a bit taller for them. So an area where we might be able to stretch them. But what did you make of the Pies game last week, mate?
Well, we were recording while this game was happening, and we saw Carlton going ahead comfortably. I think we wrapped up recording, I think around half time or 3/4 time, and I think I made the comment at the end of the show it was going to be fun getting to watch how Carlton stuffed it up, and it stuffed it up they did by once again being the losable or giving up a late game lead with Collingwood 13-10, 88, defeating Carlton 12-11, 83. There was only a point in the game at quarter time before Carlton kicked away across quarters 2 and 3, and they headed into the final change with a 3-goal lead. And then, Nick Daicos led surge saw Collingwood take the lead early in the final term and held on as Carlton fought back. So every time Collingwood kicked a goal, Carlton seemed to respond after Collingwood got in front, although the Pies did rely on a Carlton kick after the siren missing to gain a close victory.
Yeah, it was some sort of quarter or last quarter by Nick Daicos. He had 13 disposals, 9 contested, kicked a goal, had 2 goal assists, 5 score involvements. Jamie Elliott finished well and does what he does. He doesn't need many disposals to hurt an opposition, but really it was Nick Daicos that dragged them across the line.
Yeah. You touched on this a little bit earlier when we did the looking at the Collingwood stats, but the clearances were even in this game, considering it was against Carlton, where clearances are their one and only wood at the moment. But Collingwood did manage to dominate the territory battle, having 14 more inside 50s. But again, as we spoke about, they really struggled with their conversion. They only scored from 43% of their entries, or again, this slipped in the final quarter. So they were going even worse up to 3-quarter time in that metric.
Yeah, they kicked 6 goals in 3 quarters, the Pies, before piling on 7 in the last. Carlton were +6 for the game in first possession, but got a clearance just 60% of the time that they got their hands on the footy. Pies got a clearance 71% of the time when they got first possession. So the AFL average is 74. So I think it typified what a scrap this game really was. Both teams had numbers in and around the footy, congested sort of contested area and midfield area. Collingwood are 18th in the AFL at 69% for converting a first possession into a clearance. So it was a real scrap. Carlton won contested possession by 19, ground balls by 15, post-clearance contested possession by 19. But and have been all year just over-reliant on stoppage score. And ultimately, Collingwood had a little bit more class and a little bit more weapons at their disposal. Well, one weapon in particular, but it was a damn good weapon.
Yeah, indeed. It's a nuclear bomb of weapons at the moment. Nick Daicos, as he started for the Pies with 39 disposals, 8 clearance and 9 score involvements, whilst Harry Perryman and Pat Lipinski both had 27. Jamie Elliott was the Pies' leading goal kicker with 3, whilst Oscar Steen, Daniel McStay and Tim Membry each had 2 goals. Now, let's move on to the tactics of the match. And look, Collingwood are giving me 2000s-era Cleveland Cavaliers vibes, with Nick Daicos is LeBron James carrying average bunch of players each season. Look, it's surely more complicated than this, and the Pies do have quality on the list, but is it really a case at the moment of nullifying Nick Daicos to some extent in order to win this game? He's obviously not someone you can shut out completely, and I think it would be, it would be detrimental to try and shut him out, because that would open up so many other issues for you. And he's always going to have moments in games. So I guess, is there a method you can see that works best in lowering his overall impact? Is it a case of having to pick your moments where you have to really lock down on him? We sort of get a sense of when he's really going to be influential in the game and really trying to stop him then, or do you just have to play around him?
He's the 6th highest rated player in the AFL this year, technically the 5th, because Aaron Cadman's in the top 6, but has only played the one game, so you probably put a line through him. He's got a player rating of 18.6. Their next best is Jack Crisp at 13.2, and then Pendlebury at 11.8, McCreary at 11, and then Maynard and Darcy Cameron, the only other two above 10. So it probably does say a fair bit about the impact that he's having on his team. We're getting a little bit more of a better spread across our group. We don't have that high end that Nick Daicos has, but probably do bat a little bit deeper. I think if there was a method to stop him, everyone would do it, and he wouldn't be having the impact he has. I think you need someone, if you're going to run a tag with him, you need someone that can match him in the midfield, through the lines and in the air when he goes forward. He's dangerous at forward half stoppages because he gets on the move and has real burst. Andy McGrath is the obvious matchup, but I think that he needs help. I'd be physical with him, and by that, I don't mean doing anything untoward. I think you just need to take the opportunities to bump and knock and harass him. I think that's a whole team thing. I think we've got some bullish young guys who won't take a backward step, guys like Roby and Roberts and Day-Wicks, among a few others. I think you don't ever want to go all chips in on one player, because I think as soon as you do that, other guys pop up. And whilst they've got some guys who haven't been playing at the level they have in previous years, and age might be catching up with them a little bit, you don't want to give Pendlebury and Sidebottom and DeGoey and Maynard and these guys an even break to get hold of you. But I'd be just encouraging young guys in particular that if they get a chance to get in his face a little bit, do it. Let him know that he's going to have a tough day at the office, and we're not intimidated by his quality. And then you just hope that Andy can keep Nick to an average game or actually below average. He averages 36 disposals, 8.4 inside 50s, one goal assist, and 8 score involvements a game. So we probably want to keep him below that. But if you look at their losses, Collingwood's losses, that is, against Fremantle and the Crows this year, he's still got plenty of the footy. He was in and around his average for disposals, but his ball use rating was well down. His disposal efficiency was below 68. So I think that's the key here is we're not going to stop him getting a lot of the footy. If we do, amazing. But I think what we want to do is make him feel uncomfortable when he has it. And that has to be our priority, is just limiting the effectiveness of what he does with it, not necessarily how many times he gets it.
Indeed. Look, last week we struggled at times with us kicking long into our forward line, where the Suns' intercept defenders really gobbled up what we were doing. I think we improved as the game went on there, but early on, even though we were getting scores on the board, we were really sort of feeding them their intercept defenders, and that gave the Suns impetus to kick off down the other end. This week, we're coming up against the Pies, as we touched on before. They're one of the best set-up teams defensively. They're one of the best teams at taking intercept marks, and you've got players like Jeremy Howe, who at his best are going to feast if we kick the ball in like we did at times last week. So I guess, how do we more effectively adjust the way we enter the forward line, particularly upon leaving clearance where we're a bit more rushed and the like?
Yeah, I think we're doing more right in this regard in the last couple of weeks or 2.5 weeks. We've had a better balance at the coalface, which we spoke about earlier, and on the outside. And I think that gives us the best chance to move the ball effectively from clearance. And I think that's the big message to our young players. Big game, big crowd. These young guys are going to be over eager to get their hands on the footy. It's really important that they hold their shape around the contest, go when it's their turn, but just be switched on to spread offensively and defensively when we don't win the ball at the contest. And it's going to be the number one factor in this game. The Pies are the 18th ranked team in the comp for contested possession this year. They're minus 24 in their losses, but close the gap to minus 9 in their wins. So we don't want to give them a contested possession advantage in this game. And in fact, we want to turn it into a real disadvantage for them. And that gives us the best chance to then get the game on our terms. And then from there, I think we just want to really make the ground big and give the Pies more ground to cover. So that means, spreading the ball wide if we need to, slow when we need to, fast when we can, direct when we can. But it also means that I think we want to see Nate Caddy get up the ground and take one of their intercept defenders away from dangerous areas, because I imagine he's likely to get probably Howe, just because I think that the athleticism lends itself to that. And then let Edwards and May do the work closer to goal, which they've both proven that they can do well. And May is in that anchor role, and Frampton will have an important role to play. And then hopefully Edwards can get into some dangerous spots. So yeah, it's a boring answer, mate, but contest isn't something they've been doing well. If we can do it, we've been doing it better. If we can make that the priority, and then that gives us a chance to spread the game from there, then I think that's where we have the biggest chance of doing some damage on the scoreboard.
Indeed. Speaking of damage on the scoreboard, and another thing we touched on earlier, the Pies are heavily reliant on scores from turnover this year. It is the biggest source of scores for all sides, but they average 60% of their score from turnover, which is compared to the league average of 55. Where they're particularly effective is at getting teams, when they're exiting their defensive 50, they average a goal a game from turnovers in their sort of forward centre, between the centre line and their forward 50. Then the rest of the league in the ground, the best, the one of the best at getting you when you're exiting 50. Is this a case where we have to be ultra cautious exiting our 50 to avoid playing into their hands? Or does that also, by being cautious, does that really play into their hands as well? Because as you say, they're one of the best set up sides. You're just giving them more time to set up. So is it a case of you want to try and go fast to stop their setup, but you're running the risk that we're going to be being dangerous in an area where they're most dangerous, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, got you.
I got there in the end. It took a while.
You did. It's both, mate. I think we spoke about this after the D's game. A lot of the focus was on our number of intercept marks, but when you broke that game down first half versus second half, the first half was, the game was played a little bit more in chaos, and the the thing that I liked about the Suns game is we got back into the game in different methods. I think Damien Hardwick would be really disappointed with the number of intercept marks that they gave up against us, and we were able to find some tempo football when we needed it. But we also scrapped our way back into the contest just through, contest and clearance and finding a way forward at all costs. So I don't think there's one way that we go about things. I think people are trying to get their head around what's shifted and how things have changed and are putting it down to a game plan change. I think ultimately what's happened is we're just getting more ball at the contest, and that's giving us a better chance to get field position. And then from there, we've shown that we can either control possession through uncontested marks or we can play with a little bit of chaos. The Pies are the number 2 ranked team for intercepts in defensive 50s. 43% of their intercepts come in that part of the ground, and they're below the AFL average for intercepts in the other 3 zones, so defensive half of midfield, forward half of midfield, and the forward 50. Frampton, Howe and Maynard average between 6 and 6.5 intercepts each. So, our 3 tools, we've already touched on it. If they can separate and keep them accountable, then we can have a big impact in actually minimising the Pies' impact or intercept impact. It was probably the reason I was keen to play another small forward this week. And Gresham's kicked 6 goals in 4 games. He's been doing his role as a small forward because I think you really want our keys to focus on bringing the ball to ground. But I think that the other thing too is that the Pies concede 110 marks a game, which is the 16th most in the AFL. And we've said it before, and I'll say it again, take what the opposition gives you, and that's what they'll give us. So use that to just shift their defence when we need to. They're 12th in the AFL for conceding marks inside 50. So I think they'll give us opportunities if we're patient when we need to be patient, but I also think they'll give us opportunities if we can go fast and take on some riskier kicks. But we just have to get that balance right.
Indeed. And look, we saw it last week for the Pies against Carlton, and we've seen it a fair bit against us as multiple occasions where it's happened, including on Anzac Day. I think back to Brad Scott's first Anzac Day game in 2023. We were well in front heading into the final quarter, and the Pies really ran over the top of us, and they've really had the edge over us in these games, mostly due to their experience and their experienced players being able to perform at crunch time and being able to chase down those leads and get over the top of it. So I guess if we do end up in a situation like that, a game where we're leading in the last quarter, what are we going to have to do to best handle the inevitable pressure that will come?
I think we just have to keep attacking the game. This young group, I think, just are enjoying playing footy and enjoying playing together. So let's just let them do that, I think. And that was what we did against the D's, wasn't it? We were 3 or 4 goals up at 3/4 time, and we took the game on and opened it out to 8 goals. So I think don't go into preservation mode, just enjoy it, keep taking the game on and look to put scoreboard pressure and put the game into a position where Collingwood can't come back.
Yeah, and then on to the final thoughts, as I touched on at the start of the show. And again, we do want to hear your own thoughts. We've seen a lot of positional changes work for the Bombers these last 3 weeks. So I guess if you were in charge of the Magnets this week, Jono, what's one change you would make that would give us the best chance of success?
Yeah, I think sometimes doing nothing is the biggest decision of all. And I think we're starting to see some trust and continuity build amongst the group. So, we've already got to adjust to Ridley not playing, and he's been a bit of a chief organiser down back, and Mason Redmond's not there either, and McGrath's playing in the midfield. So we are, light on for some experience down back. So I'd be reluctant to make too many changes from last week other than the Force one. But I think one area I would look at, being a hot day off the back of 2 interstate trips, it was pretty hot and taxing up on the Gold Coast, is look to get Sharp and maybe even Roby some midfield minutes. I think the Pies are experienced. They've played in a lot of big games and they know how to chase from behind, as you touched on. But I think youth and run on a hot day, it might be the kryptonite to what they've got. So I think, maybe just upping our midfield rotations, particularly late in quarters, a little bit more by giving Sharp and Roby a taste might just mean that we can keep the foot down for longer than the Pies can.
And Dean, you touched on that. It's something I probably should have brought up when we reviewed the Suns game, but doing the centre bounce rewatch and data was really noticeable how often we rotated our players through against the Suns. And it's probably one of the reasons why we were able to keep up the pressure for the entire game. We've talked in the past about how too often we've sort of stuck with the same mix, and that's when we've got found out. So it does seem like they're prepared to really throw players around. Look, those of you listening, again, make sure you get your own moves that you make in the YouTube comments or on our socials for this episode. It'd be really interesting to see what you guys come up with and whether any of them play out on the day. Look, that will do us for another Don the Stat. Can you believe it, Jono? That was our 98th match preview. You might be dressed like Steve Jobs, but unfortunately you didn't get the new Apple CEO position there. So I think you'll be sticking around for a little bit longer, at least till we raise the ton of match previews. Thanks for all your efforts, Jono. It's been another great show from you. I can't wait to get to the MCG on Saturday and see how things play out. Any final words from you, mate?
Yeah, not quite Steve Jobs, mate. It's not a turtleneck. I just don't have much of a neck, so I make a regular t-shirt look like one. But yeah, no, you're stuck with me for a little bit longer just yet. Yeah, no, thank you too, mate, for all the prep work you've done this week. It's yeah, I mean, we said it already, and we say it each year. It's such a special day, and yeah, for lots and lots of reasons, football takes a bit of a backseat. It's a real privilege to be an Essendon fan or a Collingwood fan on days like this. So yeah, let's hope our young group can live up to the pressure and the hype and expectation of a big day. I've got a sense that they're up for it. It's going to be a big challenge against a really well-drilled and well-experienced team. But yeah, it's exciting and I can't wait to get there.
Well said there. As always, stay safe, everyone, and go Dons.